Good afternoon, and also welcome from my side. I think reflecting back throughout the day, this kind of underlying idea has actually been shaping all of the sessions throughout this conference so far, and I think we're going to also continue here, which is that when we think about smart cities and talk about it, quite often we start to talk about the use of digital technologies, data, all of those aspects to really shape and how could we operate cities better. But as you probably have already heard and could probably also resonate with, is that technology alone cannot really make cities resilient by itself. We need people, we need processes, we need the way how we actually think about it, etc. And this is also the kind of, let's say, red thread throughout our conversation that we're going to have. Another kind of reflection from the morning sessions have been that cities are really complex. There's multiple crises going on at the same time. We deal with aspects, you mentioned disinformation and misinformation, then there's climate effects, then there's geopolitical tensions, then there's internal aspects that we need to consider, social fragmentation and so forth. Now, all of this needs to be somehow considered at the same time, and the question becomes, how do you also prioritize between different types of actions? And at the same time, this actually means that we need to consider somehow resilience also as a multi-dimensional and cross-department, cross-division type of work rather than a single work stream or single policy area or so forth. And that's why I'm really glad to actually have all of you here here in Tallinn and on stage, because all of you have some different ways of working with the topic of resilience. And I think now we're in the, let's say, time of the day to further explore those practical examples, actually, which is also my actually starting question to all of you, that either from personal or professional experience, could you please share a brief moment from your past that has actually shaped how you understand resilience? And ladies first.
I really hope this wouldn't happen. It's, I did my PhD in urban resilience, and before that I didn't even think about resilience because that was about 10 years ago. And as Esteban said, he worked on resilience for 20 years back, and that topic was just emerging. When I started my PhD, the resilience topic was just getting traction in academia, let's put it that way. So that actually was my first kind of really encounter with this. Therefore, I did all of the theoretical work and empirical work on that before I actually came face-to-face with some kind of actual crisis. And I think from the personal perspective, probably we all have lived through a pandemic nowadays, something that was so unexpected that we were so unprepared for. So I think that, demanded a certain degree of resilience from the whole society, both on individual and on community level, and also on the governance level, because I would say I really didn't envy anyone on any kind of governmental position who was making these decisions what to do in a situation where we didn't know really what to do. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Ernesto.
Well, the thing is that we don't know what is going to happen, because last years we are in a scenario that we are, at least I'm not predicting what's going to happen. Who 5 years ago predicted the COVID-19 pandemic so badly? And then I remember that at municipal level, at the IT department, it was really hard, because then all of a sudden we should move from physical work, desktop work, to teleworking. And this was a disruptive change for us. So we have to react immediately to this situation. Some years after, we suffered a fire in a building in Valencia. All the building was destroyed, and it was a disaster. And some months later, we had the Dana. And some months later, we had a power cut that all the systems were down. So things are happening, and we try to be prepared, but normally we are not so good so as to predict what is going to happen. So this, for me, is one of the main difficulties for dealing with that. But after all these events, we are applying contingency plans that at least we had them.
Mm-hmm. Just to, sorry to interrupt, but I think what you're also pointing out right away is the aspect of crises not as exemptions, but actually as somewhat even sometimes as default activities in a way, and we need to be ready for this.
We know that a new one is going to come, but we don't know from where.
Yes. Denise?
No, I just started thinking about the black swan, so maybe it's on a spectrum, because like war in Iraq or in Iran, you're not predicted. For me personally, probably for the large scale, I realized during the first year of the full scale invasion in Ukraine, and we had a lot of disruption. So cyber attacks, even a few months before start of the war, and then Russian intelligence disinformation campaigns, and then later on power outages. All that in parallel with increased demand for the social services, either from the residents of Kyiv or people who are running from east through Kyiv. So that helps us to realize that basically it's not about the technology per se, or not solely technology. What is really important is whether institutions understand and could perform under pressure. So yes, technology helps, but as any gimmick, today it will be probably AI, like the technology only magnifies what you already have in place. So it probably will only help you to see through that better. So fundamental test is whether we could coordinate properly, where we could make the decision paths clear, and whether residents could really trust information they get. So for me, resilience is not something that we try to bake as soon as something develops heavily, but it's deliberate choices by design done before the crisis.
Definitely. Just to continue right away with you, Dennis, also we've discussed a little bit in the past that you mentioned this quote, resilience by design. When you talk about it, and from your experience also in working with cities in Ukraine, what does that actually mean in practice? How does it happen in everyday work life?
I don't want it to sound like a war briefing or trying to bring a new knowledge. I think His Excellency Mayor of Tallinn put it like at the beginning. You think about the realism, you think about the governance, you think about responsibility. So what we've seen that works universally in cities in Ukraine, like three components. The first one was the clear separation, definition of the roles. And you might have the chief resilience officer like in the city of Antwerp. You might have chief information security officer like in the city of Amsterdam. Whoever, there might be a person that doesn't have the name resilience in their title, but there is someone who has enough credibility and he could activate public-private partnership and interaction between different city bodies. Second one, we had a discussion 2 years ago through at City Lab event in Mexico, and there was a question to the mayors, what do you see the biggest threat for you? And so in top 3 was misinformation, disinformation. So for the city to be able to disseminate or send targeted communication and just not, okay, something bad happened in the city, maybe down to the specific district, which we've seen like examples Valencia. This which really saves lives and really helps to avoid some panic. And third one for me would be operational visibility. So it might start with some dashboards you have built on some basic data for the mayor or the digital officer. It might come out with a setup of a situational awareness center, but not to have it like fragmented, but the overall picture that really helps to coordinate properly. So for me, resilience by design is eventually how the institutions, information, and communities organized before and during the high pressure.
This is actually quite a good segue to my question to Ernesto, because this operational visibility is also the aspect that you mentioned about building those dashboards and so forth. And at the same time, you also admitted that you monitor that and it's not so used actually. Can you reflect a little bit of like, how can you increase that, that it actually becomes a ongoing operational tool for urban planners, people who have distinct roles and responsibilities then to actually work towards resilience?
Well, we have different strategies so as to expand the message or spread the message. When I have seen this in the morning session, these digital twins about the flood, in which you saw the Helsinki city covered by water. I think that this tool is good with this immersive experience in a way. Let people know what would happen if in this situation. So, for example, digital twins are tools that could work with simulation scenarios, predicting with this amount of rainfall during this period of time, you could have this situation. And if in an easy way to be understood from citizens. So this could be a thing that could be good. Apart from that, I know that I have explained some things about the data, and this is an example of what not to do. So sometimes we normally describe our successful story, but not our failure story. And we have this clearly failure story about managing the data. So the data right after or during the disaster wasn't managed well. And you have mentioned a word that has set an alarm in my head, coordination. Because in our case, coordination was really bad. I hope, is it being recorded?
Yes.
I hope not.
It's live stream.
Connected?
Maybe it's also an alarm.
Anyway,
Well, yeah, we had a problem of coordination, data, so people are blaming each other of not managing the right data. So after this event, I hope that data will be managed in the proper way, in a more coordinated way, because we have this body for coordination, this control center, but it didn't work. Because, well, let's send an alert for warning people that they should stay at home. No, let's wait. No, and then the disaster came.
It needs this type of systemic way of creating and making sure that it actually is reliable. We'll actually come back to this aspect also a little bit later. But turning to Lita, I think what I know is also from or has been in your focus during your research is this aspect of that. When we think about crisis, these are oftentimes these very quick disruptions, natural hazards, conflicts, things that you might predict and you might also be able to assess, but they're still sneaking around the corner in a way, and you don't know when exactly this would happen. But there's also this very, let's say, hidden crisis that you've been looking at that also actually can lead to weakening muscles, if we take an analogy of a human body as a city, then that we actually are not capable of facing those challenges. Can you tell a little bit more about like what to learn from this, and especially in the context of community engagement?
Thanks, Sille. Yes, so I worked more on the concept of slowly occurring crisis, or slow burn, so-called. And essentially, climate change is one example. So, I mean, it hasn't started yesterday. It has started some years ago. And it's just natural disasters is basically already an outcome of a slowly occurring crisis. And this is a cumulative effect as well. So we have similar processes happening. And the thing is that we see in the society still nowadays, some people, well, hear the word climate, and this is a high negative, you know. They don't want to accept it. And it's interesting that in some cases, right, it's not politically popular to some degree to admit, okay, we are in a slowly maybe occurring crisis, maybe things are going not the way, let's say, our strategy says it would go. And then if we ignore it long enough, then it becomes an actual problem on a city level. So either we have social issues or there's infrastructure failures and so on. And then I think the takeaway, what we've seen from around Europe and other places, is that, well, you need to be brave enough to maybe make these uncomfortable decisions sometimes, to look at the data, to use the data, and really not ignore potential crisis that is slowly coming and sneaking up on you anyway. Of course, we are always on alert for these kind of very disruptive events, and these bring about a need for an immediate response. But proactively, we also need to think about general changes globally that we are experiencing at the moment, right? So we can't ignore both the slow and the fast approaching crises, and we also cannot ignore the fact that we are not necessarily aware of all the crises that could happen. So we talked about the multi-crisis situations, but there's also plenty probably of crises that we still don't know that will occur, I'm guessing, in the next decade or so. So, yeah.
This actually relates a little bit to a question that has come in through Slido, that we've seen already some kind of graphs about what is perceived risk in terms of the ranking, and also like how actually like maybe more objective ways of looking this. But when mapping risks, how do you actually consider different groups in this context? Because risk for one group can be one thing, but for another group it might be a different one. So how to do that, and especially in this context of short-term, long-term view, maybe from your perspective, and then also actually we'll hear also Ernesto's and Dennis's view on that.
Yeah, I think probably Esteban covered it the best. You know, we have different locations with different degrees of vulnerabilities, and also within one city we have different neighborhoods, different built environment setups, you know, and people with different ability to kind of mobilize their own resources and respond to different crises. So hence, we are having this also increasingly discussion in at least academic society about, and also about, let's say, in climate neutrality and climate adaptation discourse about, you know, how do we integrate aspects of justice in this, right? How do we make sure that, for example, our measures that we put in place are not serving just one certain social group as well? And this, again, you know, requires a little bit moving outside your information bubble and actually maybe engaging, especially for decision makers, to engaging with different situations on the ground. You cannot ignore certain social groups, especially, let's say, in the global south cities that are actually vulnerable on top of vulnerable, let's put it that way. Yeah. So there's a different possibility. So maybe I'll pass it on to you.
Anything to add to that?
Well, when we have such a diversity of cities around the world, so when I have shown the map of the list, the ranking of risks, so for sure that will be different in different areas. You know, for us in Europe, for example, there are some social, those in red, that could be not so relevant and as in other areas of the world. For example, I'm sure that in Africa the climate change could be relevant, but for them the most important thing is to have something to eat every day. So, but focusing on that, the thing is that we should pay attention to all these aspects in which we can have something to do. Because, for example, at municipal level, we have some competencies, and we should work together with the rest of level of government. But we have some fields in which we could have a direct impact, and we try to do our best, for example, in those related to cyber attacks for preventing our resources, or for keeping working our resources, but also at environment, even though the environment is not municipal, it's global. but we could take some measures to manage this situation, such as, for example, the DANA, or others that are not natural. For example, we suffered in Spain, the whole country, power cut in April 2025, and it was a drama. So we weren't prepared for that. So what to do now? So and the main outcome, the lesson learned from that, is that we should have at home camping stoves, bottled water, lighters, radio, not electronic, but an analogic radio with batteries. So things that are really basic, but we have noticed that right after this effect. So, and we should have in mind that we have some fields in which we could have more range of influence, and we could work with this risk. For example, at local level, we can do nothing at geopolitical level. So it's at the country level and even bigger, so at worldwide level. But we are now focusing on that, on all the aspects that we could do from a practical side, because cities have some priorities. Most of us in Europe have similar priorities, and we are focusing on that, at least from Valencia perspective.
If I may, Denise, a little bit changing the kind of perspective from that question about, let's say, navigating between the different risks, because of course, if to use the very simplistic Maslow's pyramid of needs, like you need to keep people safe and fed and so forth. So of course, conflicts in Ukraine case is also very much on the top of list what to deal with, but it's not. Ukraine is not, let's say, what's the word? Other crises are also affecting Ukraine at the same time. So, like, how do you actually prioritize attention, resources, all of that, to also deal with other things at the same time?
Well, I think it's again three-part answer. So, one, you consider capabilities of the communities or neighborhoods for self-organizing. Probably close example for Western civilization will be Sunday church meetings. So they know how they cooperate, and in case of crisis, they probably gather in a church and then decide what to do. Second one, obviously, in terms of the infrastructure, there might be different impact. So back from my telco experience, if the telco cable has been damaged, then probably I'll get several thousand incoming calls. I probably would not need to answer all of them. I could just put an IVR message that, yes, we know the problem, we'll work with that. And you could survive without internet, probably. The other case will be if you don't have the phone connectivity, then you might have vulnerable groups like elderly or people who need special care that should be paid a visit to check if they're okay, if they need any kind of support. And then a third part would be around again, about the information. So I would not call it to the granular level, but as specific and as a minimum practical, you could provide data. Let's say, okay, something crisis happening around you, you need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. That will really help. Instead of saying, yeah, the crisis level is red or orange, that might impact this group and the estimated damage is whatever. What I really like, and I shared yesterday when we discussed, this beautiful concept of value of societal life. So eventually the cost the society is willing to absorb to save one's life. So for last year, for EU, it was 3.8 to 4.2 million euros. And when you have discussions with your leadership in a city or digital leaders, like if somebody says, well, we might not do something special in the public safety resilience, say, well, if only that could save 10 lives, it's already meaningful and work around that. But again, as Chief of Police mentioned, it's probably testing, training, exercising for any continuity plans to be validated. And yes, for sure, you need to do that probably on an early base, if not even more frequently. Like we did in Kyiv, we did several exercises The two largest was one, what will happen if Russia will destroy the water dam and the flooding speed and how evacuation should work. That didn't happen, thank God. Second one was what will happen if missile will target either of the power generating plants. This happened last year and this year, and then we've seen to the scale that the efforts were needed. So you always have finite resources. You might have infinite problems, so you prioritize what services could be put on hold, like given permission for placement of new advertisement. If you have power outages, probably that could wait a bit. But if you need to provide extra emergency medical support, that should be done like immediately.
Yeah, when you, sorry, but I wanted to react to his contribution. Establishing priorities, I think that is crucial. And there are some aspects that initially they are not the main priorities. And I would like to put the example of cybersecurity. As I have mentioned before, cybersecurity is a huge threat. And, but it's not politically sexy to invest on cybersecurity until you have an attack. And then you notice that, well, what I wish I would have spent more money in cybersecurity. We have some examples in Spanish cities that they are suffering the impact of a cyber attack months later. And during some months, the whole activity of the municipality has been locked. So nothing. And imagine all the activity in the municipality not being not having access to the systems, to the files, to the bills, to nothing. So it's a drama. And sometimes it's difficult to seduce the decision makers to invest in some aspects such as cybersec, for example.
It needs to hurt to start moving sometimes. So it's a question about how to maybe trigger that. And actually this example of using some maybe fake videos to create the dramatic kind of response that Peter also talked about in the morning can maybe sometimes be a way to generate that. But I wanted to also come back, Ernesto, to one of your points that you mentioned during the talk, that to create confidence. And in your use of digital twins and CitiVERSEs and so forth, I wanted to ask, how do you actually, or do you use those tools also to engage the citizens and communities and ecosystem partners to use those tools to somehow simulate, work with that, and through that perhaps also create some level of confidence to deal with hazards?
I know that you're involved in a type of projects in which confidence is crucial, that is data spaces. Now, data spaces are everywhere, as digital twins are, and we are managing projects for data spaces in which we have different data providers, data consumers, someone that is governing the data space. And here, the main word that always appears in the talks about data spaces is confidence. So you have to have confidence within the different stakeholders, that producers, consumers, and I have even heard about having a rank. As you rank the hotels in Booking or wherever, you rank the trustworthy or the confidence that you have in different stakeholders of this ecosystem, because these are data ecosystem, the data spaces. You could have even a marketplace with an economy of the data. And then for moving forward in this new paradigm of data sharing, the key word is confidence and collaboration again.
this is, again is a good segue. I don't know. It seems like there's a narrative building because we've talked a little bit about the different use of digital technologies in the use of also managing those crises and building resilience and so forth. Lita, like when you look at this aspect of using technologies actually as tools, how do you see that? Like, does it strengthen our muscle towards building resilience, or it actually also at the same time creates sometimes vulnerabilities?
I think it does both, depending, of course, as with every digital tool, it depends on how you use it and for what purpose do you use it. If we, for example, take an example of just communication or citizen engagement, right, which is rather crucial during the times of crisis, also during the preparation for any crisis, right? Digital tools are good to reach many with the same message, for example. At the same time, not all people are open to using digital tools, and there's also different kinds of digital tools, especially for communication purposes nowadays. So, and the population is diverse. So you probably need to use a kind of a multi-tool approach to reach everyone, if in the times of crisis. So yeah, it's also very interesting. For example, in Latvia, we are currently testing this kind of announcements on a mobile phone, right? And they are kind of hiding it behind like some kind of rather ridiculous emergency situations, like slippery streets this winter, for example. We have everyone receives a message on their phone, right? And so people are starting to complain. So why are we receiving? I mean, this is not really emergency. What is, of course, hidden behind it? They just need to really test the system on the national level. And if they actually openly said that, I think there wouldn't be such a big kind of commentary on social media. Oh my God, this is again happening, you know? So again, how we communicate, which tools we use to communicate, and also, of course, confidence and trust building into these tools is also very important. So that you really know that the information is coming from a trustworthy source is also very important. Yeah, especially during times of crisis.
What about Denise? I know that in Ukraine you're really using a lot of advanced tools also for managing those situations. In your experience, what are some of the aspects that you really see that really help to manage crisis situations?
I like what Kristen from GLA mentioned earlier about that the data is not automatically means insights, and overload of data is not always good, because just because you think that being able to aggregate data that will then trigger some actions, not usually the case. So historically speaking, in many cities, transportation and utilities and a police and fire department, there will be different authorities with different systems, and then you have the data silos and process breakdowns and some delays. So probably the biggest impact which we will have is to create a shared situation awareness. And then I always give this example, probably the favorite one, the movie Die Hard with Bruce Willis. So you see, okay, the guy is coming, nothing. Oh, now you have that body, okay, then we'll get FBI engaged. And then it increases by the going top for the level of authority. So shared situation awareness, and then trusted communication channel with feedback loop. Those two where you'll get the tremendous value, and you could use it both in the crisis and under normal operates.
So it's not even so much about specific tools, but really that the way how we use the tools to create that type of shared understanding.
Yeah, like because again, the aspect we discussed, cities will have different sets of data, different sets and different systems which you historically has collected. Now you need something on top of that that you could really ensure the service orchestration, be it then for the maintenance operation, be that for the working under pressure or any extreme crisis, let's say related to climate change.
Mm-hmm. We see that time's up, so I'll just do a very quick last round from each of you. We saw that the graph when we started the afternoon part was that we lean more of this Gaussian curve with how ready local communities are for resilience. Nobody responded that they're on a scale of 5 being ready. So in your case, what is the one thing that you recommend local communities to do as in the next year, actually? Just to put a time frame for it as well. Do you want to start?
Well, yeah, I think what is rather useful, one thing is, of course, what Ernesto already mentioned, is to prepare yourself to some degree individually, get some of the stuff you need at home. I think, I don't know how it is in Estonia, but in Latvia, the 72-hour kind of toolkit is rather popular these days. Yeah, and I think maybe check who your neighbors are. Are they good people? Can you rely on them in case of crisis? And currently, we also have an increasing opportunity to at least undergo some basic training. What will happen in emergency situation, what to do, where to go, what communications channels to follow. I think this is just the basic for the individual and for the community or your neighborhood as well. So
instead of 1, we got 3. Good.
Sorry.
Ernesto.
Yeah, I would like to focus on the right use, the sensible use of data. We are producing a lot of data and use this data with purpose. So not having data for having more data, but with a purpose, used in a friendly way, so as to make it more usable for decision makers. And in this group, I would also add citizens. And finally, to collaborate. So let's work together. And normally, I love this African proverb that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go farther, go together. And then, in this case, going together, collaborating cities. We have different spaces of collaboration, networks, initiatives. And I think that they are really useful for learning from each other, not reinventing the wheel every time.
Mm-hmm. Dennis?
I'm sort of prominent supporter of the position that, well, every resident owns the city and defines the priority by voting, polling, public participation. I just written something super short, but I just want to read it. I think it gives the beauty for that. So, resilience is a deliberate governance discipline expressed through how decisions are made, how responsibility is assigned, and how institutions behave under pressure. So when those disciplines are in place, resilience becomes viable, visible, and actionable when needed. And so ultimately, all discussion we had today and following will be about what kind of institutions cities really want to be. And the community will be their main force.
Very good. Thank you for summarizing this also to this nice thought. We have a couple of minutes actually also to take questions from here, from the room. I see a hand coming up already there.
Hi, thank you for an interesting panel. Still Alessandro, still from the Lisbon Council. I think you a little bit touched upon it and maybe also this morning, but maybe if it's relevant, I wanted to highlight something or ask you to highlight something. So already when I read like smart, safe and resilient, for me, safe and resilient is an explanation of what smart means for a given city, for example. Working a lot with innovation, it's the same thing. Everyone talks about innovation, but what is innovation? Like for what purpose, right? So the other day, and I finished my premise, I was listening to a podcast by Rainer Kattel. I think everyone knows him. And he was talking...
Yeah.
What?
He's from UCL.
Yes. London, yeah. So he was mentioning about how basically some capacity and capability for innovation, it's actually capacity and capability to anticipate and, for example, avoid these strategic surprises, which to me is very similar to what resilience and safety means. So I wanted to ask you if you have, maybe in your experience, a specific team, department, office, who's kind of like, if there is, in charge of kind of like this anticipatory work, or maybe who could be there if there isn't today.
Mm-hmm.
Hope it was clear. Thank you.
Maybe directed to people working in the cities then, Ernesto.
I have to admit that we haven't. We, as I have said, we produce data, for example, for the mayor's office, and probably we miss this profile for scientists of data. So new careers are flourishing, and related to IT, I think that these profiles for analytics, analyzing the data, are necessary. And up to now, we, as in the public administration, is not agile to create new, in the list of positions in the municipality, we don't have this for data analytics. So we have statistics, statistic profiles, analysts, but not with this profile of IT. So I think that, that having this could improve the management of data so as to produce reports that could be more understandable for the mayor's office, for example. Because if we expect people from the mayor's office starting the computer and then accessing the dashboards, probably we have been too optimistic.
Mm-hmm. Dennis?
I'll probably counter-argument will say, in what sense cities are smart? They're sensible. But to answer your question, in our case in Kyiv, the CDTO-CIO line, even though it's digital IT, but we de facto operate as a change management office. We just narrating and making changes through digital and helping departments. But in any case, you cannot just force anyone to say, tomorrow you are really advanced and innovative. Like, no, you need to create an ecosystem where they will be really feasible. So we are lucky to have a mandate from the mayor to sustain positive change and bring an impact. And it goes at the speed that city and internal departments could do. And last piece, but important, I had a discussion with a gentleman who is head of the Institute for Smartest Cities of South America. And they did research back in 2022, asking what is the #1 reason for fail of smart city programs. And #1 was the failure to communicate what change means for the people working in a city council or the city hall. So you'll probably start with people, and then all the rest will come up. Technology, partners, use cases, and hopefully then some recognition.
I'll take one question also from Slido that has come in, and I'll direct it to you because you mentioned the slow burn crisis, and the person asked what could be the slow burn crisis in the Baltic Sea area that we have to be prepared for.
Baltic Sea area, that's very specific. Well, to fulfill disclosure, so my PhD was in urban shrinkage in Riga, which is a capital city of Latvia, because the population is decreasing, and this essentially creates a rather vicious loop for the city and city development. So that is like example of one slowly occurring crisis, because typically you ignore the population decrease until you expect that it will start growing at some point, and somehow, specifically in Riga, this hasn't happened in the Baltics. Well, we also have gone through an economic crisis. This was probably also something that people knew will occur, but somehow ignored it. So yeah, and I think in Baltics, like everywhere else, eventually climate change will catch up with us. We've been rather lucky in our geolocation, but it probably, not going to stay that for a very, very long time. Yeah, but I want to comment on anticipatory governance, but okay.
Then if it's short, you can still comment. No? All right. Then I will just encourage you to find each other also during the coffee break. If I'm not mistaken, then it's time for that. Thank you so much for the panelists.
Thank you.